I never thought I'd be writing this story, but here I am at 3 a.m., unable to sleep after everything that's happened. I keep going back to that day 3 years ago when my whole world turned upside down, and honestly, I'm still processing it all. Let me start from the beginning. I'm 25 now, but this all started when I was 22 and about to graduate college. I had been incredibly fortunate because my grandparents on my mom's side had set up a college fund for me when I was born. It wasn't a massive amount, but it was enough to cover my tuition at a decent state school, plus some living expenses. My parents, Dad especially, always made a big deal about how responsible I was with money, how proud they were that I was getting my degree in computer science without putting them in debt. My sister Evelyn is 2 years younger than me. She's always been the creative one in the family. While I was studying algorithms and data structures, she was making TikToks and Instagram posts about her cooking experiments. She's genuinely talented at cooking, I'll give her that. But she had this dream of becoming a big food influencer. My parents, especially Mom, were always gushing about her follower count and how she was going to be the next big thing. The thing is, Evelyn had always been the favorite, not in an obvious way, but in all those little ways that add up over time. When she wanted a new camera for her content, they bought it immediately. When I needed a new laptop for my programming classes, I had to save up for months from my part-time job at the campus IT help desk. When she got a C in chemistry, they hired a tutor. And when I struggled with advanced calculus, they told me to figure it out or switch majors. But I didn't really mind because I was focused on my own path. I had a solid GPA, good internship prospects, and I was actually excited about my future in tech. I had interviews lined up at several companies for after graduation, and everything seemed to be falling into place. Then, about 2 months before graduation, Dad called me with devastating news. He told me he had been to the doctor for some routine tests and they found something concerning. He said the word cancer and my heart just dropped. He explained that he needed to start treatment immediately, but their insurance wasn't going to cover everything. He was talking about experimental treatments out of network specialists, the whole 9 yards. I was completely shaken. Dad had always been this strong, invincible figure in my life. He worked in construction management, and he was always the guy who could fix anything, lift anything, handle any crisis. The thought of him being sick was terrifying. He asked if I could access my college fund to help with the medical expenses. He promised it was just temporary, that once the insurance sorted things out and he got back to work, he'd pay me back with interest. He kept saying it was an emergency, a life or death situation, and that the money wasn't doing any good just sitting there when he needed treatment right away. I was torn between I had been planning to use the remaining money in that fund for graduating school. I had already been accepted to a master's program that would start in the fall, and I was going to need that money for tuition. But how do you say no when your father says he might die without treatment? The fund was technically in my name since I had turned 18, but Dad had always been involved in managing it. He knew all the account details and he had helped me set up the withdrawals for my undergraduate expenses. He made it sound so reasonable, so temporary, so necessary. I signed the paperwork to transfer the money. It was about $35,000 that was left in the account. Dad was so grateful. He kept hugging me and telling me I was saving his life. Mom was crying, telling me how proud she was of me for stepping up for family. Even Evelyn seemed touched by the whole thing, posting on her Instagram about how amazing her big brother was for helping Dad through his health crisis. For the next few weeks, I threw myself into finishing my final semester. I deferred my graduate school acceptance, figuring I'd reapply the following year once Dad was better and could pay me back. It was disappointing, but family comes first, right? But then weird things started happening. Dad didn't seem to be going to any appointments. I offered to drive him to treatments, and he always had excuses about why he needed to go alone or why they were rescheduled. He didn't look sick. He wasn't losing weight or losing his hair or showing any of the signs I expected from someone going through cancer treatment. I started getting suspicious, so I did something I'm not proud of. I went through his wallet when he was in the shower one day and looked at his insurance cards and any medical paperwork. I couldn't find anything about cancer treatments or oncologists. What I did find was a business card for a kitchen remodeling company. That's when I started paying attention to other things. Mom had been mentioning how excited Evelyn was about some new project, but she was being vague about the details. There had been contractors coming to the house, but they always seemed to be there when I was at school or work. Evelyn had been posting less on social media lately, which was unusual for her. Then one day, I came home unexpectedly because my professor had cancelled class, and I walked into a completely torn apart kitchen. There were contractors everywhere, and Evelyn was standing in the middle of it all with an expensive-looking camera crew, filming herself, talking about her vision for the space. I stood there in shock, and Evelyn saw me and got this deer-in-headlights look. She tried to play it off like it was a surprise for the family, but I could see the guilt written all over her face. That evening, I confronted my parents. At first, Dad tried to maintain the cancer story, but I pressed him on specifics. What kind of cancer? What was his treatment plan? What hospital was he going to? Could I speak to his doctor? The more questions I asked, the more his story fell apart. Finally, Mom broke down and admitted the truth. There was no cancer. Dad had made up the whole thing because Evelyn had this opportunity to partner with a major food brand, but she needed a professional-grade kitchen to film her content. The brand was potentially going to sponsor her channel, which could lead to a cookbook deal, maybe even a Food Network show. They saw it as an investment in Evelyn's future. Dad actually said that college rarely lands you with a real job anyway, that Evelyn's influencer career had more potential than my computer science degree. He said I'd be fine because I was smart and resourceful, but Evelyn needed help to reach her potential. I was absolutely devastated, not just because of the money, but because of the betrayal. They had made me think my father was dying. I had cried myself to sleep worrying about losing him. I had given up my graduate school plans. I had been telling my friends and professors about my family's medical emergency. Now I found out it was all a complete lie. The worst part was how they tried to justify it. They kept saying it was still family money being used for family purposes. They acted like I was being selfish for being upset. Dad even suggested that when Evelyn's career took off, she'd be able to support the whole family. So really, I was investing in my own future too. Evelyn, for her part, seemed genuinely sorry, but she also didn't offer to stop the kitchen renovation or give the money back. She said she'd pay me back once her channel started making money, but she couldn't give up this opportunity. I realized that night that I couldn't stay in that house or even in that city anymore. These people had looked me in the eye and lied to manipulate me into giving up my future for Evelyn's pipe dream. The trust was completely broken. I had been applying for jobs, and I actually had an offer from a tech company that had a branch office in Dublin. It wasn't my first choice originally because it meant moving abroad, but suddenly it seemed like exactly what I needed. I accepted the position without telling my family. Over the next few weeks, I quietly made arrangements to leave. I found someone to sublet my apartment, sold most of my belongings, and got my passport and work visa sorted out. I told my parents I was going to visit some friends in another state before starting my job search, and I'd be gone for a couple of weeks. Instead, I flew to Dublin and started my new life. I didn't completely ghost them initially. I sent a text letting them know I was safe and that I needed some space to think about everything that had happened. But every time they tried to call or text, I felt this wave of anger and hurt all over again. Mom would send these long messages about how much they missed me, how we needed to work things out as a family. Dad would send shorter texts asking when I was coming home. Evelyn would send pictures of her new kitchen and updates about her follower count, as if that would somehow make everything okay. After a few months, I just stopped responding entirely. I changed my phone number, created new social media accounts, and basically disappeared from their lives. It felt harsh, but I needed to heal. And I couldn't do that while they were constantly trying to pull me back into their drama. Life in Dublin was actually amazing. The work was challenging and rewarding. I made great friends with my international colleagues, and I finally felt like I was building something that was truly mine. I got promoted twice in 3 years. I was able to save money and travel around Europe, and I genuinely felt happy for the first time since the whole mess started. I sometimes wondered how Evelyn's influencer career was going, but I resisted the urge to check her social media. I wanted to move forward, not backward. Then 3 weeks ago, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. It was Mom, and she was crying. She said she had gotten my new number from my old university, though I'm not sure how that worked, since I had specifically asked them not to give out my contact information. But apparently she had convinced someone in the alumni office that it was a family emergency. She told me that Evelyn's influencer career had crashed and burned spectacularly. Apparently the brand deal fell through after a few months when Evelyn's engagement rates weren't meeting their expectations. The cookbook deal never materialized. The Food Network opportunity turned out to be just a preliminary conversation that went nowhere. But Evelyn, convinced that she was on the verge of making it big, had kept spending money on equipment, marketing, professional photos, and even hiring a manager. She had maxed out credit cards and taken out personal loans to fund her content creation. Mom and Dad had co-signed on some of those loans and had been helping her make payments. When it became clear that the influencer thing wasn't working out, Evelyn pivoted to trying to open a catering business, then a meal prep service, and then an online cooking class platform. Each venture required more startup money, and each one failed within a few months. Eventually, my parents had to mortgage their house to pay off Evelyn's debts. Then they had to sell the house entirely when Evelyn's latest business idea, some kind of gourmet food truck, left them on the hook for a massive loan when she defaulted. Mom was calling to ask if I could help them financially. She said they were living in a small apartment now. Dad was having to work extra hours even though he's approaching retirement age and they had no savings left. She kept saying how sorry they were about what happened with my college fund and how they realized they had made a terrible mistake. The thing that really got to me was when she said they had been trying to find me for over a year, but I had covered my tracks too well. She said they missed me terribly and just wanted their son back. I honestly didn't know what to say. Part of me felt vindicated that Evelyn's dreams had crashed and burned after they sacrificed my future for her. But part of me also felt sorry for my parents, who are genuinely struggling now and facing retirement with nothing. I told Mom I needed time to process everything, that I'd call her back. That was 3 weeks ago, and I still haven't called back. I keep picking up the phone and then putting it down again. Thing is, I'm doing really well now. I have a great job. I'm in a serious relationship with an amazing woman I met here, and I'm actually in the process of applying for Irish citizenship. My life is good and I'm happy, but I also can't shake the feeling that maybe I should help them. Not because they deserve it, but because they're still my family. At the same time, I'm angry that they only reached out when they needed money. For 3 years, they let me disappear without really trying to find me or make amends. They only tracked me down when Evelyn's failures finally caught up with them and they needed a bailout. I also keep thinking about the fact that they never really apologized for the lie about cancer. Mom said they were sorry about the college fund situation, but she framed it more like a financial mistake than a deep betrayal it actually was. They made me think my father was dying to manipulate me into giving up my future, and I don't think they fully understand how devastating that was. So I guess my question is, am I wrong for not immediately jumping in to help them? Should I continue with the no contact, or should I try to rebuild some kind of relationship? And if I do decide to help them financially, how do I set boundaries to make sure they don't see me as their emergency bank account? I'm really struggling with this and I could use some outside perspective. Update 1. I didn't expect my post to get so much attention, but thank you to everyone who took the time to read and respond. The overwhelming consensus was that I shouldn't feel guilty about my family's situation and that I should be very careful about re-engaging with them. A lot of you shared your own stories about toxic family situations, and it really helped me feel less alone in this. After reading all the comments and thinking about it for a few days, I decided to call my mom back. I figured I at least owed her a conversation, even if I ultimately decided not to help. The call was intense. Mom immediately started crying when she heard my voice, and she kept saying how much they'd missed me and how worried they'd been. She said they had tried to respect my need for space, but they had been hoping I'd eventually come home. I asked her directly why they had only reached out now, when they needed money, instead of trying to contact me earlier just to rebuild our relationship. She got defensive and said they had tried, but I had made it impossible to find me. I pointed out that if they could track me down through my university now, they could have done it years ago. That's when she admitted that Dad had been against contacting me earlier. He felt like I had abandoned the family and that if I wanted to come back, I should make the first move. But now that they were in financial trouble, he had agreed to let her try to find me. I asked about Evelyn and how she was handling everything. Apparently, she's moved back in with them and is working as a server at a chain restaurant while trying to figure out her next move. Mom said Evelyn feels terrible about how everything turned out and wants to apologize to me personally. Then Mom started getting into the details of their financial situation, and it's actually worse than she had initially let on. They don't just owe money on Evelyn's failed businesses. When they sold the house, they still owed more on the mortgage than it was worth, because they had refinanced it several times to fund Evelyn's ventures. So they walked away from the sale with nothing and still had some debt left over. Dad had to take a job at a big box hardware store to supplement his construction work because his body can't handle full-time physical labor anymore. Mom, who hadn't worked outside the home in over 20 years, got a part-time job at a grocery store. They're barely covering their basic expenses, and they have no emergency fund or retirement savings left. Mom asked if I could send them a few $100s a month just to help them get back on their feet. She promised they wouldn't ask Evelyn for help anymore and that they had learned their lesson about her business ideas. I told her I needed more time to think about it, but I also asked her some hard questions. I asked if she understood why I had left and why I felt so betrayed. I asked if she realized that lying about cancer wasn't just about the money, but about making me think I was losing my father. She got quiet for a long time, and then she said she thought I was being dramatic and holding a grudge. She said what they did was wrong, but it wasn't malicious and families are supposed to forgive each other. She said I was successful now, so obviously everything had worked out for the best. That response really bothered me. It felt like she still didn't understand the gravity of what they had done, and she was minimizing my feelings about it. She seemed to think that because I had landed on my feet, their betrayal didn't matter anymore. I ended the call by telling her I needed more time to process everything and I'd contact her when I was ready to make a decision. She asked how long that would take, and I said I didn't know. Since that call, I've been going back and forth on what to do. Part of me wants to help because they are struggling, and I do have the means to make their lives easier. But part of me is worried that helping them financially will just enable them to continue making poor decisions, and that they'll see me as their personal ATM whenever Evelyn's next scheme inevitably fails. I've also been thinking about what it would mean to have them back in my life. I've built this great life in Dublin, and I'm not sure I want to invite that old drama back into it. But I also miss having a family. And I wonder if I'm being too stubborn by holding on to this anger for so long. I'm still processing everything, but I wanted to update you all since so many of you were invested in the story. I'm not sure what I'm going to decide yet, but it helps to write it all out. Update 2. Things have taken a really unexpected turn, and I'm honestly not sure how to feel about any of it. Yesterday morning I got a call from Evelyn. I almost didn't answer because I wasn't ready to deal with that conversation yet. But curiosity got the better of me. She was calling from outside a police station and she was clearly upset. She told me she had just filed a report against our parents for identity theft and fraud. I was completely confused. So she explained what had happened. Apparently, while she was living with them, she discovered that they had been opening credit cards in her name, taking out loans using her information. She had been wondering why her credit score was so bad despite being young and having minimal credit history. So she pulled her credit report and found all these accounts she had never opened. When she confronted them about it, they admitted that they had been using her identity to get credit for several years, even before the whole kitchen renovation thing. Some of the money they claimed was for her business ventures was actually just them using her credit to cover their own expenses. Evelyn said she had been naive about the business finances because she trusted them to handle the paperwork and contracts. She didn't realize that many of the loans and credit lines were in her name, not theirs. She thought they were co-signing to help her, but actually they were putting everything in her name and leaving her responsible for the debt. She found out that they had destroyed her credit and left her on the hook for over $80,000 in debt that she knew nothing about. That's why all her business ventures kept failing. She wasn't actually bad at business. She was trying to run businesses while our parents were siphoning money out of the accounts for their own use. I was shocked because this was so much worse than anything I had imagined. Evelyn said she had been protecting them by not telling me the full truth about what had happened, but she couldn't keep covering for them when they had literally stolen her identity. She also told me something that made my blood run cold. She said that after Mom had called me a few days ago, Dad had started talking about trying to get access to my financial information. He had been asking Evelyn if she thought I would put them on any of my accounts or help them get a loan. Evelyn got scared that they might try to use my identity the same way they had used hers. That's when she decided she couldn't protect them anymore and went to the police. She apologized for everything that had happened 3 years ago, and she said she finally understood why I had left. She said she had been young and stupid and caught up in the excitement of her influencer dreams. And she hadn't realized how manipulative our parents were being. She thought they were just being supportive of her goals, not using her as a pawn in their financial schemes. She asked if she could come visit me in Dublin. She said she has nothing left in the US now, and she wants to start over somewhere new. She's been researching how to rebuild her credit and deal with the identity theft, but it's going to take years to sort out. I told her I needed time to think about it, but honestly, I'm leaning towards saying yes. This whole situation has made me see Evelyn in a completely different light. I thought she was the spoiled favorite child who got everything handed to her, but it turns out she was being victimized too. I'm also really disturbed by what she said about Dad wanting access to my financial information. It makes me think that their call wasn't just about asking for help. They might have been planning to manipulate or defraud me too. I haven't decided whether to call them back or just let the police handle everything from here. Part of me feels like I should warn them that Evelyn has gone to the authorities, but part of me thinks they deserve whatever consequences are coming. This whole thing has made me realize that the situation was so much more toxic than I even knew when I left. I thought they had just lied to me and stolen my college fund, but apparently they were running a whole pattern of financial abuse that went on for years. I'm grateful that I trusted my instincts and got out when I did. If I had stayed and tried to work things out, I might have ended up in the same position as Evelyn, with my identity stolen and my credit destroyed. I'm still processing all of this, but I wanted to update everyone because the story has changed so dramatically. I don't think I'm dealing with normal family dysfunction anymore. This is straight up criminal behavior. Update 3. The last few days have been absolutely crazy, and I'm still trying to wrap my head around everything that's happened. First, Evelyn is here in Dublin. I decided to let her come visit, and she arrived 2 days ago. Seeing her in person was weird because she looks so different from the Instagram perfect version of herself I remembered. She's lost weight, not in a healthy way, and she seems genuinely traumatized by everything that's happened. We spent hours talking, and she filled in so many gaps in the story that I hadn't known about. Turns out that the identity theft started when she was still in high school. Our parents had been using her social security number to open utility accounts and even got a credit card in her name that they claimed was for emergencies. She didn't know about any of this because she was still a minor and trusted them completely. When she turned 18 and started wanting to build her own credit and financial independence, they convinced her that the best way to do it was to let them help her manage her accounts. They would handle all the paperwork and just tell her what she needed to sign. She was so focused on her content creation that she didn't pay attention to the financial details. Evelyn also told me that the cancer lie wasn't just used on me. They had told her the same story to convince her that the kitchen renovation was urgent and necessary. She thought she was helping save Dad's life by agreeing to let them use her credit for the construction costs. She had no idea that they had also manipulated me into giving up my college fund. But here's the really crazy part. Yesterday, I got a call from a detective in my hometown. The police investigation into Evelyn's identity theft claim had uncovered something much bigger than we realized. It turns out that our parents had been running this same scam on multiple people for years. They had used the cancer story on several relatives, including my mom's elderly aunt, who had given them over $15,000 for Dad's treatment. They had also convinced Mom's brother to co-sign on a loan by claiming it was for medical expenses. The detective said they found evidence that Dad had been researching how to obtain people's personal information for identity theft. And they discovered several fake documents with different people's names and social security numbers. This wasn't just desperate parents making bad financial decisions. This was organized fraud. They've been arrested and charged with multiple counts of identity theft, fraud, and elder abuse. The detective said that with all the evidence they'd found, they're likely looking at several years in prison if convicted. Evelyn and I are both listed as victims in the case, and we'll probably have to testify if it goes to trial. The detective said that Evelyn might be able to get some of the debt discharged since she can prove it was fraudulent, but it's going to be a long legal process. I keep going back and forth between feeling vindicated and feeling sad. On one hand, I'm glad that the truth is finally coming out and that they're facing consequences for what they did. But on the other hand, these are still my parents, and it's hard to accept that they're actually criminals who were willing to victimize their own children and elderly relatives. Evelyn and I talked about whether we feel guilty for reporting them, but honestly, we both feel like we didn't have a choice. If Evelyn hadn't gone to the police, they probably would have continued victimizing other people. And based on what she told me about Dad asking about my financial information, I might have been their next target. Evelyn has decided to stay in Dublin while she sorts out her legal and financial situation. She's applied for a few jobs and she's looking into getting a visa that would let her stay here legally. She said she wants to start completely over and build a life that's actually hers. We're both in therapy now, trying to process the fact that our parents aren't who we thought they were. It's been helpful to have each other to talk to since we're the only ones who really understand what it was like growing up in that house. I've been thinking a lot about the people who commented on my original post, telling me not to feel guilty and to prioritize my own well-being. You were all so right, and I'm grateful for that advice. If I had ignored my instincts and gone back to help them financially, I would have just become another victim in their scheme. It's weird to think that my decision to go no contact, which felt so drastic and harsh at the time, probably saved me from years of financial abuse. Sometimes the thing that feels like giving up is actually the thing that saves you. I don't know what's going to happen with the legal case or whether my parents will actually go to prison, but I do know that Evelyn and I are both finally free to build lives that aren't built on lies and manipulation. And honestly, that feels like the best possible outcome, given how messed up this whole situation was. Thank you to everyone who took the time to read my story and offer advice. This community really helped me see the situation clearly when I was still doubting myself. Sometimes you need strangers on the internet to tell you that yes, your family really is that dysfunctional, and no, you don't owe them anything just because you share DNA. Stay tuned for more stories from our girl relationships.